Good morning. I'm Jim Spencer. I'm with the Bluefield West Virginia Economic Development Authority. Welcome to our morning class on Cybersecurity 102, focusing on small business. And we're proud this morning to have Andrew Baker back with us. He did a phenomenal job there a couple of weeks ago on the 101, and going to drill down a little bit more. Don't want to steal his thunder, but he did a phenomenal job on the last one. Look forward to this one. And we partnered with the Small Business Development Center on this. And Steve Johnson with the SBDC spoke at the last session that we had at the end. Today, we've got Harold Pattison, who is a business coach with SBDC. He'll be talking a little bit at the end of the program about the SME program that they do and other things like that. But these programs are very important to me. And when we think about the businesses that we serve, there's a lot of needs that they have, and sometimes they don't even know what the needs are. But where we're all being forced to use more with online presence, things like that. Matter of fact, I'll give you a personal example. My wife called me 2 Saturdays ago and said, "Did you just buy something on Etsy?" And I said, "No, I did not." So the next thing you know, I'm getting to speak to somebody online about that, and there was a fraud claim and all that kind of stuff, because I've never bought anything off of Etsy in my life. And so things like that, you have to get on it quick, and you need to be protected. So we'll turn it over to Andrew. Andrew, thank you. I personally want to thank you for what you're doing, and you did a great job. I look forward to today's program. So Andrew.
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. There we go. Okay, are we good? Can we see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Good morning, everyone. This is Cybersecurity 102 for small business. A couple of weeks ago, we did 101, and we encourage you to look at those because there's some foundational things there that will help you in understanding this, but we're going to try and get some basics in here as well. We're looking forward to moving through here. This is for small businesses. This is targeted for small businesses, and we're going to focus on essential steps that business owners need to take. We're going to look at covering e-commerce, how to protect yourself from spam, email, phishing attacks. We're going to talk a little bit about ransomware, and we're going to talk about some basic procedures and policies that you will need for your business in these areas. And there'll be a list of resources at the end of the presentation, but we're going to cover, we're going to try and cover a lot of ground today. Important disclaimers. Throughout this presentation, you're going to see some products and services, and they'll be in bold, and they are essentially recommendations. They're not the only solutions that you can use, but they are solutions that I know work, that I have used, deployed. In some cases, I even sell them. And so I know that they work, and I know that you can get good results from using them, but they're not the only products or services. So don't feel like you can only use these, or that I'm only suggesting that these are the best ones. Ultimately, you're going to want to speak to someone who understands your business and your business objectives to help you through your cybersecurity journey. Okay. What is the point of cybersecurity? I addressed this in some detail the last presentation, but to kind of sum it up, cybersecurity is about managing the level of risk that you and your business face so that you can reduce the likelihood of adverse business events occurring, right? You don't want bad things to happen, but you still want to make a profit, okay? You don't necessarily have to run your business like Fort Knox, but you do have to recognize that there are serious threats that you face in the online world that can just destroy your business and reduce your funds to nothingness. So it's important to understand that. There's no such thing as a free lunch. As you're making your decision about security, security processes, security tools and technologies, understand that there is this continuum that you have to work with, okay? You can get things that are fast and secure, but they may not be inexpensive, almost certainly not likely to be inexpensive. You can get things that are secure and inexpensive, but they're probably going to be slow. Right? You're going to get 2 of 3. almost all of the time. That's not to say that inexpensive things are bad. That's not to say that pursuing security is bad. It means that you're going to have to balance and you're going to have to make compromises about how much you spend, how much time you take, how complex a thing is. It's important for you to understand that in security. Okay, some basic facts about cybersecurity. Why are we having these presentations? Jim just mentioned an example that's a real life example on a personal level, but it applies to the business as well. If you are on the internet in any way, you are at the risk of cyber attacks. As a small business, you're almost certainly going to be attacked because statistically, your business security is probably not good enough to detect an attack. So it's worth attacking you. A lot of times people think, well, I'm not a big multinational organization that has a lot of money. No one's going to know that until after they've attacked you, unless it's a targeted attack where they're really looking at who you are and what assets you have before they attack you. Most of the attacks that you'll see are blind or are targeted against your devices and their vulnerabilities. The other side is there are lots more small businesses than there are multinational businesses. So hitting up 1,000 small businesses will get you some money eventually, right? So it's you need to understand that you're going to be attacked, and you're probably connected to a large organization anyway, and so that's a good reason to attack you. The cost of poor security is always higher than you think. It's not just the cost of whatever you've lost, it's the reputational damage, it's the cost of remediating it, it's the cost of getting back your identity, getting back control of bank accounts. It's the increased security that burden that other people will put on you, possible increases in your insurance. All of these things are factors. So the loss of $10,000 worth of assets will almost certainly cost you more than $10,000 to get back. How you spend money is more important than how much you spend. All right, so we will always want to be smart about it. Don't just throw money at a problem. Most breaches start from phishing attacks. And we're going to show that, we'll talk about that more when we get into the email security part, but most breaches start from a phishing attack of some sort. The more individual components, I want us to emphasize this. In the last slide, it said complexity is the enemy of good security. But to break that down a little bit, if your security involves lots and lots of small pieces, that complexity is probably going to hurt you. The more individual components you need to manage, the more potential risk you will have, and the more complicated your security will be, right? So you want security to be as straightforward as possible, but covering as much ground. And I want this to be clear for us. If a skilled attacker is determined to break into your network, they will be successful. That's not for you to lose hope. You need to understand that the majority of people that you're dealing with are not skilled attackers, right? They're not targeted attacks. Most of the attacks you're going to see and experience, or attempts that you're going to see and experience, are moderate, low to moderate attackers using scripted tools, targeting vulnerabilities of systems they can find. Okay, Russia and China are not necessarily going to be attacking your environment. Okay, but you're still going to lose if you allow some random guy up the block or in another country to attack your systems successfully. The majority of attacks that you face in 2021 for sure are not going to be from people who are super, super skilled and dedicated to attacking your specific environment. Cybersecurity can guarantee certain things and it cannot guarantee other things, okay? It does not guarantee that you'll never be attacked. You can buy the best tools, hire the best people, monitor, and do all of the right processes, but you're going to be attacked. Whether those attacks are successful or not will remain to be seen. You're going to be attacked. Good cybersecurity does not prevent you from being attacked. It doesn't guarantee that you'll never be breached. We need to understand that. right? Don't feel like, well, I'll be breached anyway, so it doesn't make any sense to put any effort into this. No, that's not true because, and we're going to get to that because in the next slide. It won't guarantee, good cybersecurity will not guarantee that you'll never suffer downtime related to a security event. What good cybersecurity does do, what it can do, is greatly reduce the chance that an attack will be successful, greatly reduce the impact of an attack if it is successful, right? Having enough layers means that people might break into your lobby, but not into the rest of your building, right? And that's a physical security example, but that's how you should look at it. They broke into your room, but they didn't get into your safe, right? These are the kinds of things that you want to do on a cybersecurity level. Greatly reduce the scope of data that is attacked, okay? So they got usernames, but they did not get passwords or other personal data. It can increase the chance that a successful breach will be detected early because they have to go through many steps. You have an opportunity to catch them in the act or before they've been able to get something because they're trying to be stealthy. And it can reduce your liability in a successful breach. And we're going to talk about liability later. Okay, let's start with e-commerce. We had a number of questions on that, and we wanted to cover that. E-commerce, I'm going to recommend that you pursue a specific strategy as it pertains to e-commerce. There are really two ways you can go about it. You can have your regular old website, and you can decide to add e-commerce elements, right? WooCommerce, as an example, is an e-commerce plugin that you can add to a WordPress website. And there are other tools of a similar nature. Now, I have used Shopify, I've used Wix, I've used Weebly. I can recommend all of those as being viable. I have not used BigCommerce, but I've seen really good things about it. I have used WooCommerce, and I think it is a good application, but it does not support the strategy I'm mentioning here, which is get an integrated platform. If you're doing a few dollars here or there, if this is like a personal website where you're selling some extra stuff, fine. WooCommerce is as good as any of the other products mentioned here. But if you are looking to run a business that is predominantly e-commerce and you're looking to send a lot of money through that, you're going to want to use an environment that is built for that, right? It's the difference between having a stand at a flea market and having a shop in a mall, right? They both will allow you to sell things, and they're both good avenues for selling things, but one is designed specifically for that, and one will allow you to manage lower levels of activity there. So I recommend that you get an integrated e-commerce website. And that will, because security will be throughout the entire site, not just the parts that the transactions are flowing through. Okay, so that's the first thing you want to consider. So these products, among others, there are other viable products too, but these products I've definitely used, and they would fit in that model. Once you have your e-commerce site up, assuming that you're running it yourself, although, again, if this is for your business, make sure that you have a good website provider that's helping you with this. You have to keep your e-commerce platform up to date. You have to make sure that you stay on top of notices for fixes that come out, security and process changes. You need to make sure that that's going on. Make sure your site is backed up daily, and always make a backup before you do an upgrade. Okay. Now, from a liability standpoint, you don't want to capture any data that you don't need to from customers. Keep those transactions to the lowest level possible. You need their name, you need their email, you need a way to get the product to them. But if you're using an e-commerce platform, it's handling the financial part so that the PCI limitations or the PCI compliance requirements are not going to be your direct responsibility. They will be your platform's. You ultimately own what your platform is doing, right? But you're outsourcing that responsibility to someone else so that the bulk of compliance requirements will belong to that someone else, right? And you make sure that you don't get information you don't need from them. Just get what's necessary to execute that transaction. It's nice to be able to upsell people and to be able to send them additional marketing things. Do that within the confines of the e-commerce platform and let that data be stored within the e-commerce platform so that you don't have personal liability for someone's data if, in fact, there is a breach to your site. Make sure that any data that you transmit between your site and your e-commerce provider, or between that data and your office, between your website and your office, is done using secure protocols, okay? Don't just send critical data using email. That's not a good way to handle that. You have other protocols, and again, these are things that you'll want to discuss with your e-commerce provider, whoever's hosting that site for you, your whatever the marketing team is, or the team that's tied to that. Make sure you understand that, but definitely secure protocols. Depending on the revenue, as a small business owner, you're going to need to minimize your financial risk. Depending on the amount of revenue that's coming in through this thing, you may want to consider having a separate account with your bank that's just for the e-commerce. That way, if anything goes wrong there, it affects a part of your finances, but doesn't necessarily affect where payroll is or your day-to-day operational funds. That's something to evaluate. It's not a guarantee you must do that, but you should consider that, right? So that if there's any kind of a breach, any kind of a fraudulent activity that might, or apparent fraudulent activity that might impact you, that it doesn't cut you off from all of your funding. If your bank offers a merchant account, evaluate it. I'm not saying that you should use a bank's merchant account, but evaluate it. See what it offers compared with Stripe and Square and PayPal. Those guys are really large, and in many cases, they'll offer better pricing for you. But make sure you understand what is involved there, what you might get, what advantage your bank might offer you in terms of liability, in terms of being able to do arbitration against fraudulent transactions. There may be certain things that your relationship with your bank makes better for you than using one of these larger providers. But generally speaking, the larger providers are safe, and they do enough revenue, enough transactions flow through them that they're going to offer you better pricing 9 times out of 10. And have a lawyer, whether you have a lawyer on retainer or you're using a service like Rocket Lawyer or Legal Shield, have someone review that e-commerce contract, right? You don't want to find out that anybody can complain about the transaction and get refunds against it, and you don't have a chance to arbitrate them. You want to make sure that both the cybersecurity part of your transactions and the physical aspects of those transactions, that you have control over them, or at least understand how they operate. And people can't execute fraud against you by claiming you didn't ship something when it successfully got to them. We spoke about Cloudflare the last time, and you should again consider putting your website behind Cloudflare, because denial of service attacks, they're really good at protecting those. So even if you have, no matter who you have your e-commerce site with, Cloudflare can still be a front end to that. And that can help you tremendously in protecting yourself from denial of service attacks, which, by the way, a denial of service attack is where someone somewhere sends a ton of traffic to your website to basically prevent it from processing legitimate transactions, okay? A distributed denial of service attack, the double D, is where they leverage multiple machines on the internet from all over the place. Those are harder to protect against because it's hard to figure out exactly who's doing it, and it's a more dynamic attack. Again, Cloudflare and other providers like them are very skilled at identifying and protecting your your hosting environment from those kinds of attacks. So you definitely want to be able to block people who are going to try to prevent you from making your money on the internet legitimately. That's e-commerce. Does anyone have any questions about e-commerce that they want to throw in? We're about to head over to email here. Okay. Communications channels. You may have seen in the news recently that Electronic Arts, which is a large game publisher, suffered a breach because of Slack. They were using Slack, the Slack communication tool, and there was a phishing attack done, a social engineering attack against them, where someone tricked one or more parties into getting enough information that allowed them to take over the account and get into their environment. So you need to protect your communication channels. Phishing attacks via email are still the most predominant way that businesses are attacked, but they can be attacked through things like Slack, Teams, and even Zoom. They can be attacked that way, and they can be attacked via SMS and other mobile attacks. Those are a little more personal and less business, because you can't be sure that anyone is using their mobile directly in business, whereas the other attacks are more obviously tied to business, but you need to protect against them. If you are using your corporate email, there are technologies, DMARC and SPF, you see them listed there, and we'll have links to them at the end. They provide email authentication. Ask your provider if they're using them and look to use them. They're very easy to implement, and they will do a lot to cut down on the amount of spam that comes into your environment. Definitely consider implementing an email security gateway. Proofpoint and Mimecast are two of the premier providers. I've used both of them, and I, in fact, use Proofpoint currently for my business. But I've used both of these products for different organizations, both as an employee and as a consultant. And you can put those in front of any email providing service. So even if you're using Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, Office 365, or any other email provider, you can still put these other tools ahead of them to get more robust email security. It'll cut down tremendously on spammy messages and allow you not to click on links that are bad. It will greatly reduce the threat of incoming email malware. Enable two-factor authentication for your email accounts. We spoke more about two-factor authentication in the previous presentation. Enable it for your email accounts. That's not on mobile, that doesn't necessarily happen. Usually mobile accounts don't support it, but you certainly want to implement it on desktop or laptop accounts that you will access through your desktop or laptop. Pay close attention, especially the addresses where you're going to get the most spam and the most attack attempts are things like sales and info, because almost every company has them, because those accounts are not generally, people don't pay as much attention to them. And those accounts, a lot of people are going to touch them, open them, because they're possibly revenue impacting. So guard those accounts, make those accounts a little bit more stringent, confine them in some way, scan those more aggressively for malware. And then restrict in your organization who can send to the everyone account. So almost every mail server has a way to send to everybody on that mail server in that domain. And you want to restrict who can do that. It should be people from your senior management team, your marketing team, well, maybe not marketing, even corporate communications, depending on the size of the organization, right? So in a smaller organization, that might be 2 or 3 people. In a larger organization, that might be 2 or 3 departments. But you definitely want to restrict who can do that. Otherwise, anyone who takes control of any wimpy account in your environment could send malware to everyone in the environment, thereby enabling them to get to move up in terms of what account they're able to take control Please secure your mobile devices. Your mobile devices are very important. They are a gateway into your environment. They will be your de facto two-factor device. You're using them for email. They have access. They know where you go, right? They have a GPS on them. They tell a good story about your environment, your network, and everything. And remember, if you're using a browser like Chrome, like, so if you're using the iPhone and you're in the Apple universe, there's going to be some synchronization between what your mobile device is doing and your MacBook or any other kind of Apple that you're running. Similarly, if you are in the Google universe and you have an Android phone, when you look at Chrome on your browser, by default, those searches will be reflected in the history on your mobile and vice versa. So those devices can tell a story about where you are, where you go, what you access. You need to understand that and either, take deliberate controls to reduce the convenience so that you can balance the risk, or at least understand it and lock those devices down so they don't become a liability to you. Make sure when you connect to your mail that you're using something secure, usually a protocol like IMAP with an S at the end, which is secure IMAP, as opposed to IMAP or POP3. Make sure that you're on your mobile device, the way that you're connecting to your mail server is using a secure protocol. If you're not sure, speak to the mail provider, speak to your tech support folks, speak to your cybersecurity folks. And use a mobile management. This is especially important for small business owners. Use a mobile management tool that will allow you to remotely wipe email from mobile devices. Talk about this a little bit. You can install things, even if you're running your business and saying, hey, everybody bring your own phone. We're not going to supply phones to everybody. We're not getting into that kind of expense. You bring your own phone. But you can set up mobile management so that when they're connected to your email service, you have control over the email data on their phone that's connected to your service. Not in general, you're not taking over their whole mobile device. But what it allows you to do is if somebody says, hey, I left my phone on a train and I'm still trying to get it back, I don't know, you can go and wipe all of the data related to email related to corporate email, don't want anyone to get nervous, from that phone, right? Remote wiping. And that will allow you whatever data that was stored in there would be gone from a email perspective, corporate email perspective. It means that if someone else gets that phone, they don't automatically have whatever messages and whatever information and whatever data and documents were downloaded from the phone, by the phone from your corporate mail server. So that's important, right? If you just let everybody have mail and download it, when they leave your organization, they have all this data. When they lose their phone and still belong to your organization, they have all this data. So you want to be able to control that to reduce your risk. That's what we'll talk about from a security standpoint. We're going to look at reducing the risk of compromise in a general sense for your business. Okay. Physical security is important. If I have physical access to your network or your computers, you do not have security. I can get onto your machine and with a little bit of time, get access to your network and your data. So physical security is the foundational element of cybersecurity. If there's no physical security, there's also no cybersecurity. You can have the best tools or whatever. Your box can be owned by someone else if in fact they get physical access to it. Don't leave computers unlocked and unattended in areas where visitors are. So if you have a reception area and you don't have a full-time receptionist, then don't leave the reception computer in a way that people can easily get access to it, touch it, connect things to it. You don't want that. Use video surveillance in those kinds of areas and common areas where people are. And don't plug unknown flash drives into your computers. It is a well-known trick that when we're doing penetration tests on an organization, the pen tester is almost always going to come by and drop off a bunch of cute-looking USB drives in the parking lot, in the lobby, near the coffee machine. And invariably, somebody goes to figure out what's on that, and they stick it into their machine, and their machine is taken over. Don't do it. Okay, if you find something that's suspicious like that, give it to someone who is qualified and capable of dealing with it. I have separate systems for dealing with that. So when someone says to me, what's on this drive? I put it in a different system and evaluate what happens to it before I say, oh, okay, that's just a blah, blah, right? I don't just stick it in my laptop or my desktop. I don't do it. And people get annoyed, right? I'll have friends come over and they'll say, oh, can you tell me what's on this? And I'll take it. And where are you going with that? I'm putting it in a different system. You don't trust me? I'm like, I don't know that you didn't get tricked. It's not a matter of trusting you. I don't trust it. And I'm therefore going to take care of it in a way that won't hurt me, right? Trust is all well and good until something bad happens and then people are saying sorry. It's better to avoid that scenario. No matter what size of environment you have, your goal should be to prevent non-employees from connecting to your corporate network, whether it's wired or wireless, right? You might have a guest access in your conference room or someplace, fine, but that guest network with guest access should be configured in such a way that the people who connect to it simply get out to the internet and nothing else, okay? There's no way for them to get into your network directly from that. Because if they can connect to your network, they can create problems for you. Within the past week or so, this particular situation came out. It wasn't part of the slide originally, but I stuck it in here. Western Digital, which is a company I happen to like, they make a lot of good products that I like. They produced an external USB drive, which people might use for backups, data backups, etc. And they marketed it as being able to connect to the internet so you can have your own personal cloud. And they sold it for a number of years. Then they stopped selling this particular model. It was expired it was out of support around 2014. And in 2015 was the last year that they released a patch for it. In 2018, someone found that there was a vulnerability on these devices, and Western Digital suggested that because it was out of support, they weren't going to fix it, but they recommended that people stop connecting them to the internet. Well, many people either did not get that notification, did not look at that notification, but absolutely did not follow that notification. And they were still on the internet. And this past week, some malicious actors found that they could reach these devices, and they executed a remote wipe command against all of the data on those devices. Many people all across the world lost their data on this, and very few of them have been able to successfully recover them. So one of the lessons learned here, there are several lessons. One, you have to stay up to date on patches and notifications from a vendor. Two, when something is no longer supported, it doesn't mean you have to throw it out, but you have to understand that it represents more risk. They're no longer looking at it, and if things are found out, they'll probably not be fixing them. Three, everything that asks you to connect to the internet does not need to be connected to the internet. Okay, does not. Your personal storage, your backup device does not need internet access. Absolutely does not. And I have a couple of smart televisions in my house, and they ask to be connected to the internet, and I refuse to give them any such connection. They are not connected to my network, right? I don't want them doing, there's no business that they have in connecting to the internet, and so I don't give them an opportunity. They're not connected to my Wi-Fi, they're not connected to my local network, and I block their MAC address from connecting to my firewalls at all. Everything that asks to be connected to the internet does not need to be connected. When you get these slides, you will be able to get to this link and see more information about this specific compromise. But there are many lessons here that you need to bear in mind. More things to reduce compromise. Every service that you use on the internet, every website, almost every website, especially from a business perspective, it's going to have an administrative mode where you can, make changes and configuration options, and a regular user mode. When you get a firewall or router, they'll often have an admin function and a regular user function. Make sure that you put the strongest controls possible on the admin function, the longest password associated with it, the least number of people having access to it. If it supports two-factor, definitely put it on the administrative context. Okay. Make sure that you do security awareness training. The resources that we gave out in the last one, some of them are going to be in this presentation as well. Understand security training. The goal of security awareness training is not to turn you into a cybersecurity professional, but it's to give you enough understanding that you don't create problems for yourself and that you can avoid low-hanging fruit, things that are easy to avoid, that won't cost you a whole lot and will not destroy your business or your personal identity. If you receive a suspicious email, don't click on the links in the message. If you see a fake email from a bank, don't click on the links there. If someone sends you a message that says, hey, your bank may have been attacked, please check here to make sure your account is safe, and the bank is the bank you use, the bank name is a bank you use, don't click on the link there. Call up your bank using a regular phone, or open a different browser and go to your bank the way you normally go to your bank, manually or through whatever saved links you already have. Do not click on the link there. If you receive a message that's ransomware or a security message that says, hey, there's something wrong with your machine, call here to get it fixed, absolutely do not call that number. Do not call that number, because they'll have people on the other end. Cybersecurity attacks are not just network-based attacks. There are cybersecurity, there are malware providers and malware agents in other countries that have set up call centers to receive calls and direct people into installing things so that they can take over those machines more directly. Do not call numbers that are on suspicious emails. If it references your financial institution, call them directly, link to them directly. I would make a call. It'd be best to speak to a person. But if you must connect to them via their online resource, do it directly from your own, using a different browser and using a link that you know that you go to for that bank or financial institution. Let's see if we can get the liability issues covered here. We're going to try and do this quickly. So one of the questions that came up was, what kind of liability can I be in as a small business owner if people use my connection and bad things happen? Well, it depends. It depends. You can be in liability in two directions, by the way. If people are using your services, your Wi-Fi as an example, if you're offering complimentary Wi-Fi, and someone at your resort, your lodge, your hotel, your bed and breakfast, if they're using it to attack somebody else, you're going to be liable for that unless you do certain things. And if you offer Wi-Fi and people come in and get attacked, you could be liable for that unless you do certain things. Okay. Have your customers acknowledge, have them sign an acknowledgement as either part of their contract with you or when they, sign into your hotel, motel, etc., that they understand that they will not misuse the services and that they will be liable if they conduct illegal activities on it. And make sure that your free Wi-Fi is not connected to your business network. Again, don't invite problems for yourself. Make sure that you let people know that you're going to cover basic security on that complimentary service, but that they are responsible for the security of their device. Okay. They can't just connect to any random place, get attacked, and then blame you because you were offering Wi-Fi. Make sure that you have those conditions, those requirements, make them sign a waiver, and definitely speak to a lawyer about how to word it appropriately so that you can reduce your liability. Okay. You can reduce your liability exposure if a customer successfully breached while they're on your network, if you've been implementing reasonable security measures, right? So you have a good firewall that is protecting, checking for common, regular attack issues. If you make your customers sign a waiver acknowledging their risk and their responsibilities for using your network, and that's through an acceptable use policy, which we'll discuss here in a second. And the attack against your customers does not originate from your network, right? So if your network were to get hacked and you ended up with ransomware on your network because you were not protecting your own network, and then some customer on your Wi-Fi gets ransomware, your liability would be a little bit higher than if your network is protected and you're doing as many of the right things as you can, and they get an attack from someplace else. They got an email while they were on your network and they clicked on it and went somewhere. Those things you would not be directly responsible for. But you want to make sure that that's clear to everyone, that they understand that they are responsible for their liability of running antivirus on their machine and not doing things that are dangerous on their own machines, and that you're not allowing malware to get in that then it infects them, right? That's important. Policies and procedures. We spoke about acceptable use policy. There are some basic policies that you're going to want to have. I'm talking about the most critical ones here right now. Acceptable use policy explains to your employees, and in the case of a hotel, motel, or any kind of a guest facility that would have guests in it, it explains to all of those parties what the rules of technology usage are, what is acceptable to do, what is not acceptable to do, and you can even cover social media for your employees there. So you have your employees sign that so they know, I should be doing this on the network, I should not be doing these other things on the network. I should not be going to these sites that are shady, to these class of things that could get me into trouble or get my business into trouble, right? These things are appropriate use of our network resources. These things are not, okay? Password management policy. We spoke about password management in the first presentation, but you should set a policy for how passwords will be used, what length, what duration of change, how they're stored or shared, right? If someone gets a new password, how you deliver it to them, those kinds of things would be in your password management policy. Incident response plan is a document that's fairly involved. It tells your organization and it tells your business partners how the organization will respond if they believe a security incident is taking place, right? So what will you do? How will you protect the environment? How will you communicate with people? How will you engage law enforcement, et cetera, and so on? And we're going to deal with a little bit more of that in a couple slides here. And then we spoke about the CEO fraud, phishing attacks. You need to have a process that says, this is how we will handle requests for payment. This is how we'll handle requests for money transfers in our organization. You want to set those things in writing. Okay. What if you have been breached? Well, that's why we spoke about the incident management process. You need to follow that, which means that you need to have that written up in advance. You're going to need to communicate with legal counsel, your bank, appropriate law enforcement authorities, a team that is skilled in recovering from breach and getting the forensics, which is basically the investigation to understand what happened, when it happened, who did it, where it came from, and what was touched or taken. You're going to end up speaking to your key customers And you're going to need to speak to anyone that you're required to contact by law based on what data may or may not have been interfered with and what states you operate, that you do business with, right? So if anyone here is doing business with customers that are in the EU, GDPR will come into play. If you're doing sufficient business with customers that are in California, the CCPA would come into play, right? These are both compliance policies and directives that relate to privacy and data privacy in the regions discussed, European Union and California. And you'll want to speak to your general customers, and some of these can be done concurrently, right? Breach forensics. That's a technical investigation of the breach by a skilled third party. If you feel that you've been breached, if it looks like you've been breached, you definitely want to bring folks in who can validate that, verify that, and show you how it works, and will give you enough information for you to know what other steps you need to take. Public relations, corporate communications, depends on the size of your organization, but basically you're going to need to have some messaging about what has happened, right? You're going to want to do a gap assessment. Okay, so yes, someone broke in, they got this far. What does that say about the skills of my employees, the technology we've put in place, the policies and procedures that we have, what needs to be changed, improved, et cetera, and so on. And then once you figure that out, you're going to have to remediate things, upgrade things, replace systems, potentially. Depends on what comes out of that technical investigation into the breach. If you have a board or you have investors, they will need to be communicated with. Not every small business is going to have those, but you're going to have some people that need to know. And you're going to have some key customers that need to know. And then you're going to have to train staff, maybe partners. It depends on what avenue the breach came through. And there'll be new policies and procedures. And we have a couple of things here remaining, things to avoid. Get that party as soon as possible, that forensics team, and don't openly blame anyone until you know what the real answer is, okay? Don't go around saying, hey, we've been attacked by a sophisticated third party, and maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just something you should have patched 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and you didn't, right? Wait until you have information. Make sure the fourth and fifth items are important. Make sure that you don't say 4 or 5 different things from 4 or 5 different people in your organization, right? Someone should be designated to do all the messaging, or if multiple people are doing the messaging, they need to be on the same page saying the same stuff, okay? You don't want mixed messaging. People get very disconcerted when the messaging is not clear, and it will cause a lack of trust. Don't break any of your legal or regulatory obligations for timelines. The exception to that, and I shouldn't say it's an exception, it's a well understood exception. If you speak to the authorities first, they may have you not speak to other people for a time until they understand things themselves, right? So they may say, hold off on communication until we do X, Y, or Z. You may have to speak to someone in a week or in 72 hours or within a month, and you may get told by the authorities to hold off. That's the only reason, only legitimate reason to miss those other dates and times, okay? That's why you want to speak to the authorities early, so that if that's going to come into play, you have that option. But be prepared when that embargo on communication goes away, that you're ready to say what you need to say, right? Don't blame sophisticated attackers. And if your customers have to do something, if you have an e-commerce site where there was an attack and you want your customers to all change their passwords, as a safety measure, say that. Be clear. Help them to understand what they need to do. Don't be ambiguous and shifty. It will make people concerned, and they won't move forward effectively, right? More reiteration of the consistent messaging. And the rest of the slides are about notifications. So breach notification resources can be found at these locations. The FCC has some specifically for small business. The FTC has some for small business and larger businesses. NIST has some as part of their responding to cyber incident. And West Virginia has some that's internal to West Virginia, right? How the government will respond, the government agencies, but you can look at that to understand the protocols and the processes. So it's really helpful to see exactly how a larger entity would look at this and some of the things that they would consider. And then there's our resource page on the things we discussed today. Cybersecurity policy and templates for the policies we mentioned before, a list of e-commerce solutions that you could look at, a list of email security resources that you can look at, and our cybersecurity resource, the overview there. Okay. If you have any questions, or if we have time for questions, now would be a good time. Otherwise, I know that we have something else to follow as well. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Harold with us. I just want to take a note for those joining us on Zoom. If you could just take your smartphone camera and scan that QR code or visit that web link down there at the bottom. You will be emailed that afterwards too. If you could take that survey, that'd be greatly appreciated. If you have any questions, feel free to stay on the line. And Harold with the SBDC has a few things to say. Harold?
Andrew, we'd like to thank you on behalf of the SBDC for your time and your knowledge. I think it was a really good 2 workshops, and look forward to working with you in the future. For those of you who are new to this workshop, the West Virginia Small Business Development Centers obtained some money through the CARES Act, and we developed a program which we contracted with people like Andrew, and we're using their expertise to help small businesses all around the state of West Virginia. Those people like Andrew, like he just did with cybersecurity, we've also got marketing, we've got some web development, we've got some HR people, we have bookkeeping and accounting people. We have a wide range and variety of different types of SMEs that you guys could possibly use. If you need to use any of those, please get in touch with me. You'll send out my, she'll send out my contact information with the slides that she's going to send you. And please get in touch with me, and thank you for everything. Thank you for attending.
And just like Harold said, everyone who signed up will receive an email afterwards within about 24 hours with a link to rewatch this presentation, a link to view Andrew's slide deck, a link to take the survey, and a direct link in case you want to register for more workshops that we host in the future. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to stay on. Andrew, if you want to hang out for just a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Other than that, we wish you guys the best rest of your day and a wonderful 4th of July weekend for a lot of us. So thank you.
Awesome.